Now we'll start getting into the principles of design. And the way it sort of works is you learn all the visual elements, line, shape, color, all of that stuff. And then you apply the principles of designs to the elements to basically, that's how you start to compose your image, come up with your composition. And so the different ways of using the design principles, see here, unify, balance, rhythm, scale, proportion. So we will begin looking through them. So the first, unity. Does the piece feel like a unified whole piece? Do you feel that, in this case, the Henry Matisse, does it feel complete to you? Does it feel like it's nice and unified? And variety, is there sort of enough things going on here, shapes, lines, colors, that sort of keep you interested? Um, so there's two types of unity. Visual unity, whereas you, the viewer, you look at it, you're happy, and then there's conceptual unity, where the artist is happy with it, although you, the viewer, might not be happy with it. Uh, as mentioned before in some of the past lectures, where the viewer is sort of the last judge on what is art, or what is good art, what art you like. So in this case, the Henry Matisse, you might not like Henry Matisse, and regardless of how much you feel this piece is unified or how much variety, you just don't like it. Or maybe you do. It's always up in the air on who likes what. So, looking at some other examples of variety. So the Andy Warhol is kind of an easy, as far as unity goes, this sort of nice grid shape. And with the variety, all these different poses of Ethel Skull, and each pose, the little rectangle there, have a different color. While some kind of appear pretty similar, they're actually pretty different. So there is actually 36 different colors. Some of them just they differ just slightly. So as far as this idea of variety, Andy Warhol is giving us a lot of variety, both sort of with the color and the images of Ethel Skull. So kind of a lot going on with this one. The Archibald J. Motley Jr. Saturday Night. This one's kind of an interesting one. So pretty lively scene going on inside of a jazz club. So what was Saturday night like in this jazz club? Pretty lively place, kind of a lot going on, a lot of cast of characters in this painting, a lot of different things to look at. So part of the variety, there is a lot there. There's a lot going on. However, at the same time, it's sort of lacking some of the variety because it's primarily red. So it's just about a monochromatic painting. There are some little hints of yellow and kind of oranges here and there throughout the painting, but for the most part, it's, you can pare it down to white, black, and red as the color of the artist's palette. So the colors is not a wide variety like the Andy Warhol. And so moving on to balance. So the 3D world has to have balance. So here are the Moai ancestor figures on Rapa Nui, or Easter Island, where they have to have actual balance so that they stand up. That's kind of a given. If you don't have actual balance, the piece falls over and it kind of defeats the purpose, unless it's supposed to be a reclining image. But anyways, so 3D pieces have to have actual balance. What about 2D pieces? So 2D is where you get into the pictorial balance or visual balance. And so there's, some different approaches to this. The idea of balance is what side feels visually heavy than the other. So symmetrical balance, or symmetry, if you were to cut this piece up into quarters, sort of each quarter would have its own sort of visual weight, and then all sort of be equal, top, bottom, left, right. It's all pretty equal. So this would be an example here, again, picking on Leonardo, of symmetrical balance. So you feel that all the different sides are kind of nice and unified, nice visual weight everywhere. Relief symmetry or approximate symmetry, where one side is a little heavier than the other. So the Lau brothers, Welcome to the World of Famous Brands. Essentially, it's Western culture influencing and coming into Eastern cultures. Kind of what's going on here. But where is the visual weight? What side feels heavier than the other? It's kind of tricky. Usually in a classroom setting, there's, the bottom is heavy because the big sun thing back there is putting all this weight in the empty area, or some people say the top is heavy because you have the gigantic baby flying on the storks or the cranes, and are flying on the birds, holding up Big Macs and Cokes and juicy fruit gum, things like that. So they feel that has the more of the visual weight because of the babies and birds being much larger than everything else. So if you're trying to figure this one out, it's kind of one or the other. There's no real nice balance to it. Basically, what that means, one side will feel a little heavier than the other. And then asymmetrical balance. So the Zen priest Choka, he's kind of up there, and there's a lot of white, a lot of nothingness. All the visual weight is pretty much in the top left corner, and so it's asymmetrical. There's no real balance whatsoever in this. It's all up there. Some of the times with the ideas of trying to work through asymmetrical is, the vast emptiness kind of helps to balance out the little bit of image that you have. So always a fun thing to try to figure out and talk your way through. But as far as just sort of a textbook definition, asymmetrical balance, where it's all up, in this case, one corner, or, all the weight could be up at the top or down at the bottom. It's all sort of up to what the artist is trying to do. Horizontal balance, kind of like pictorial balance, but typically, one side, left and right, they seem about the same. Top and bottom might be a little bit off. But this way, where Case Beer in her photograph, she's trying to create kind of this nice equilibrium of left and right. The white of the gown versus the black of the daughter's dress. So, like I said, the idea of trying to work things out visually in a way with the visual weight. So, And then radial balance is, pretty much anything that is round, obviously. Um, so more frequent as has here ceramics, jewelry. In this case, yes, a ceramic piece with tiles. Um, so more when we talk about the disciplines of the craft, would the radial come into play. And then focal points. Focal points talked about a little before with implied lines and implied shapes and things like that, where the artists want you to sort of focus your attention on. So the Chuck Close Lucas 2, pretty much right dead in the center of the painting, is where Mr. Close is wanting you to look. And then Pablo Picasso, by isolating the subject or an object, so in this case, the lady there down in the lower right, by isolating her, but as well as, again, going back to sort of the balance, a little more of the visual weight is on the left side, but if you, kind of look at the people's faces, for whatever reason, they're just not too happy with her. They all look like some type of circus performers or something like that, and she wasn't going to let her freak flag fly high that day. So she's just her normal wear, so everyone else is kind of upset with her or something. So you can see three of the people here. They're staring at her, giving her the visual daggers. So it's creating these implied lines to sort of further lead you over to the lady there in the lower right. And Oscar Schindler's Bauhaus Stairway. So again, kind of like the Archibald Motley, where we have almost this monochromatic painting. So there's just, a lot of blues and grays, black and some white, and then a lot of directional lines, pointing to the lady there with the red blouse, the red top there. So you have, her color being, standing out a lot more because everything else, like I said, it's kind of monochromatic, kind of blends in. Her colors stands out more, as well as, the stairwells and the shapes of the stairs. It's all, these, again, you have sort of these lines, in this case, actual lines pointing to her, like the guy sort of reaching up, walking up the stairs sort of right behind her, reaching up, his arms almost grabbing hers. Part of the stairwell, pointing up and pointing down at her. So, ways to create that area of interest. And then Degas, placing objects in image. This one's a tough one. Simply because, the colors are all kind of in the same value range. When you get colors that are, within the same value range, they start to blend together. So it's kind of a lot of muted colors. Other things that you could say are problematic, obviously this gigantic flower, vase of flowers there in the middle. But when you kind of start working your way around to the other stuff, you notice the wallpaper is almost sort of floral, as well as the lace on the lady's hat. Is also kind of florally pattern. So when you start getting all these similar patterns, they start to blend in. And then same time, you might, sort of end up on the lady there, and then she's looking off. So am I supposed to look off with her? Is there something else going on that I don't get to see? Thanks to guy, you kind of have all the action somewhere else, and what's going on here? So it's almost like the whole idea of the focal points not even on the canvas. Or at the same time, you could just be stuck on the gigantic flower vase, or you're stuck on the lady because you finally get sort of this area that is completely different. Um, or if you feel you're struggling to sort of have this idea of a textbook focal point, so there's pieces out there that'll throw a curveball to where it almost feels like they have no focal point because there's everything that's going on. So now getting into rhythm. I'm sure we're all pretty familiar with the rhythms. Uh, Basic sort of music, upbeats, downbeats, up, down, up, down, up, down. Um, so kind of following that idea, the you show fishnets drawing the sun. That's pretty easy one to figure that one out. Up, down. That rhythm going on there. Another good example, the seed jar from one of the Pueblo, Pueblo cultures. You can see kind of the patterns. Again, it's sort of repeating itself. There's a lot of jagged, a lot of up and down type uh, imagery going on with it. So it's, rhythm's pretty easy. Just repetition uh, of the parts of the images. And then getting into scale. How big or how little are things? So typically when we talk about the scale of the piece, life size is sort of the basic rule of thumb. Is something larger than life, such as the Ron Muke boy. So there's an actual person there kind of standing in bewilderment on just how gigantic this thing is. And if you were to, see a Ron Muke in person, the amount of details and everything, it's like crazy on his pieces. Or you would see like, pores and wrinkles and, all this real fine detail in his work. So this idea that this, 9 or 10-year-old boy could, stand up and like sit on top of your house with how tall he is, crouched down in this little space. And like I said, there's a lady there um, to give you an idea of the scale of the piece, that it's so much larger than life. And then the David Leventhal, photographer, so in this one, it's always a fun one to discuss in the classroom because of the model and who is the model. Um, so in this case, David Leventhal photographs toys, but the way he presents them, they're much larger than life. So the model for this is basically a Barbie doll that he found a little outfit for. And if you're to see the actual photos in person, uh, some of them are sort of they're kind of blown up so that the person in the photo, or the photo, it would appear at life size. So even though the model is actually smaller than life. The next, the hierarchical scale. Uh, mentioned that a little bit before when talking about uh, the implied space. Um, when the image of the horses were bigger than the elephant, even though the horses were supposed to be in the background, and the people that were in the very far background in the building were bigger than the people that were there in the foreground. So the people in the background were more important. So hierarchical scale is basically a way to signify important people. Um, so the general rule of thumbs that I use to explain hierarchical scale, bigger is better, king of the mountain, front and center. So looking at this particular the altar of the hands, uh, they're sort of front and center, much larger than everyone else is the king. And then off to the sides are some subjects. They're much smaller, so their importance kind of going down, kind of going left and right, opposite them. Kind of medium-sized figures. So if you're medium size, you're kind of medium importance within the hierarchical scale, how you would be portrayed. And so getting into proportions, the canons of proportions. And that is basically, the Greeks figured out the idea of proportions, the golden mean, the golden section, 1 to 1.618. So you kind of see a little, if you love math, kind of a breakdown of how that all works there. Basically, how to create a human figure, human form in artwork so that it looks perfect, so that it all the fingers aren't too crazy, or the legs aren't too long and things like that. Everything has its perfect proportion, everything sort of in its right place where it needs to be. So here's kind of a little more breakdown, so that it gets kind of math heavy on what the Greeks came up with. So there's the golden means, and same time at the right side, the root 5 rectangle, which that this all sort of becomes important for creating human figures, and they also applied the measurements into the architecture, that being the Greeks. So here's an example of the use of the golden proportion. So it's basically, you can kind of break down the person into a mathematical equation. So the top of the head to about the center of the belly button is your 1, and belly button to the bottom of your feet is the 1.618. And so shoulder to elbow is the 1, elbow to the very end of your fingertips, the 1.618. So you can see how you can apply these proportions, and you can have a very realistic, natural figure in your image. And so the root 5 rectangle, based on that, you just kind of work your math problem out. The Parthenon, as well as many other of the Greek structures, their buildings, they're based on the root 5 rectangle. You can go back and do all these measurements of the building, and everything goes back to that the golden mean or golden section. So fast forward to the Renaissance, Michelangelo, many other of the Renaissance artists, sort of this exposure, this reintroduction of Greek and Roman art to have a more natural appearance. He's using the the proportions for creating the human figures in his artwork, as well as the measurements of this panel. So this is one of the panels on the whole giant, I guess, sort of mural or ceiling painting from the Sistine Chapel. The sort of big panels where he's highlighting specific stories from Genesis, they are also based on the root 5 rectangle. So again, he's using all these Greek things for more natural looking humans, as well as, creating sort of the basic outline of his panel here. And then some fun other ones. The Egyptians had their measurement system was based on the palm or the hand. How many hands are you? How tall? How many hands tall are you? What are these different sort of measurements and breakdowns for it? So that's kind of fun. While the Greeks have more of a specific measurement in mind, while you would think that, well, the Egyptians are just kind of using a little bit of different measurement system, but what's wrong with their measurement system with basing everything on a hand? How could that be problematic? And so violating the canons where you just don't care about the canons of proportion. So Alice Neal, and her work, some people love it, some people hate it because she's not following the canons. So for basically Alice Neal, she does a lot of portraits, and sort of her idea, she wants to capture the people more of who they actually are, how do we actually see them, how do we actually know them. Not sort of this fake persona where everyone has to get khaki pants and matching polo shirts. As I ask, if I was to just unannounced walk into your house, because that wouldn't be strange, would you all be sitting around in, khaki pants or maybe a khaki skirt with all matching polo shirts? Probably not. So that's not really who you are. So that's not really who this the family is. So she was more interested in capturing the family of who they are, and as far as having to follow the strict canons of proportions, that's just not her cup of tea. She's going to do what she wants. And then the piece from the Mayan culture, Shield, Jaguar, and Lady Zook. Again, some of the non-Western cultures, as the Mayans are put into non-Western art, non-Western cultures. Even their proportions are, kind of off. It's sort of, they are more interested in having their certain sort of style. I guess that way you could tell the Mayans different from the Olmecs and the Toltecs. All the sort of the cultures going on down there in Mexico at the time. So they, for the most part, don't care that much about the proportions. They want to, have their artwork and express it how they want to. And with the Mayans, it wasn't that they were sort of uncivilized. It's they just didn't care. They're often referred to as sort of the Greeks of Mexico. The Mayans, the Toltecs, and the Olmecs. They sort of make up the foundations of what the Aztecs and some of the other cultures that come later on. So they're, like I said, they're often referred to as the Greek because they were just as complex. So that is it for the all of the design principles and how they're applied and used.